A pergunta, você só fala, Carolina, e assim, mas essa é a pergunta que você faz para mim. Ah, ok. So the whole thing is supposed to be 45 minutes. Very short. 45 minutes. It will be much more adapted.
Hello, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Ana Carolina Querino. I am the representative interim of the Brazil Country Office, UN Women Brazil Country Office, and we are here together with the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, International Development Research Center of Canada, the Global Alliance for Care, the Global Afro-Descendant Climate Justice Collaborative, and the National Secretariat of Care and Family from the Ministry of Social Development. We are here together, all these organizations, to proposing a discussion on a care-centered just transition, highlighting the challenges as well as the opportunities to reframe the discussion of just transition, putting the care in its center. And we have here three distinguished panelists. It's my pleasure to be here moderating this discussion. And to start and allow our colleagues to share their views, the challenges, and etc., I would like to start with you, Carolina. Why is care central to just transition?
Gracias, gracias Ana Carolina, obrigada, boa tarde. It's really a pleasure to be here and I'm honored to represent Canada, really to support research to address what we think are the most fundamental challenges of our time, which is the climate crisis and the inequality crisis. And these crises are intersecting and reinforce each other. And the care and climate nexus is just in the middle. It's in the core of this dual crisis. So let me maybe begin with a core message from my end, which is that it's no just transition if it's not care-centered. That's kind of the key message. And the climate change and the care crisis are deeply interconnected, and we really must address the care crisis to be able to address the climate crisis. So IDRC has been supporting research to unpack this nexus and demonstrate with sound evidence how these connections between the climate crisis and the care crisis work on the lived realities of communities. So we support applied research, but also the theoretical underpinning behind that explain the intersections between these two crises. So to respond to the question of what is research telling us about this nexus between care and climate, with data and research, how the climate crisis increases unpaid care work and the care crisis. That's the first kind of arrow from the climate crisis to increasing the demand for care work. And the research we support has shown that the climate impacts such as droughts, extreme heat, floodings, displacement dramatically increase the need for care. There is clear evidence demonstrating the impacts of climate change on health. So climate-related illnesses such as respiratory diseases as associated to climate change, dengue, malnutrition, all these require more caregiving. That's evident, and there is research that is supporting this, and unpaid care work, but it's that this unpaid care work is sustained by women and girls, and not any women and girls. It's always on the backs of the most marginalized, racialized women from our societies. That's one. But also, when we see about food insecurity, water and energy access being constrained, that's a direct impact, again, on the unpaid care work and the time that women and girls dedicate to do these activities that are the most fundamental to sustain lives. Also, climate stressors, we know the evidence shows that have a direct impact on the increase on gender-based violence. And that in turn has an impact on care work and especially the psychosocial toll that we never talk, and the mental health and these invisible aspects of the work. And there is another one, a very clear relationship between climate change and increase in the demand of care work, which is climate-linked migration. So when typically men migrate to look for income, women stay. And for these women now, they have to take care of extra activities to secure food, and that's, again, an increase on the demands of care work. So you can see how the evidence is showing this very direct link between climate change and the increasing demand for care work. But there is another problem, which is that there is not only an increase in the demand of care work, but it's also that climate change erodes the systems of infrastructure, schools, health clinics, that obviously make the provision of care much more complex. There is also the erosion of social networks. So when, as I was saying just now, with the climate displacement, the care networks that sustain that work are destroyed. So that makes this link even more compounding. And then there is also the trade-off, because of the impacts of climate change, there is a crowding out of financing that could be dedicated to invest in care systems that goes to other emergencies that are prioritized, because this work that is invisible is assumed to be done anyways. So there is funding, there is that tension with the little available resources, and also in debt-constrained countries, which face debt services. And then that's another drain that moves away funding to support care infrastructure. And I think what is maybe a very problematic link is that even sometimes solutions to climate change for mitigation and adaptation unintendedly sometimes end up increasing unpaid care work. Just think about maybe some efforts on green infrastructure that don't take into account the caregivers' needs and voices, and sometimes they lead to displacement. They are not really caregivers move differently. So the transportation, they think about the design of this infrastructure with a care lens should be much more different, because otherwise we are trying to bring a solution to one crisis by increasing another one. So those are the bad news. But maybe there is another way to think about this nexus. And it is, I think, the way of thinking about care as climate infrastructure. So if we invest in care, and that's the evidence shows, we invest in climate resilience, in climate adaptation. So investing in care should be conceptualized as investing in climate infrastructure. And in these slides that you can see behind me, we have some of the research that our partners have been producing through the Climate and Care Initiative. I invite you to scan the QRs, and you will be able to access some of the publications that you see there. And you will also be able to access a new report that we are launching today. We were hoping to have the lead author of that report, Professor Mariama Williams. She has not yet been able to join us, but she will be joining us on the weekend, and we have a special invitation for you. So I invite you to engage on this piece of work in particular, which is reimagining climate finance to finance care. So that's maybe where I would leave it, just with this reinforcing this key message that investing in care is investing in climate resilience, and that care is climate infrastructure. Thank you.
Awesome, Carolina. You brought several interesting and strategic elements to strengthen this nexus. We really need to think about what just transition we want for the future. One, that can respect the rights of everyone, the rights of women, with care in its center. So thank you very much. So, Zoe, now it's your turn. Wow, no, we will present the report, right? You presented your report. Can you share some key elements of this new report with us?
Gladly, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I wanted to share today a very new research that we'll be publishing imminently from UNRIS, the UN Research Institute for Social Development, on just transition and care, which we've sort of approached from the perspective of care workers. Especially because, in the just transition landscape, and one of the, I think, important contributions of the just transition concept has been bringing workers' perspectives into debates around climate action, resisting the sort of false dichotomy that you have to sacrifice either the environment or workers, right? So what we're trying to do with this new research is broaden the scope of which workers' realities we're paying attention to. So it's not only about, of course, workers in the energy sector and the need to transition is very central to just transition, but we're arguing here in this new research and finding incredible relevance and strategic roles of care workers who are often overlooked in many just transition debates and dialogues. So the way we approached this subject was what we call sort of a workers' inquiry methodology, where we engaged in a series of conversations with people working in different care sectors or representing care workers to try to sort of draw out their perspectives and then draw some conclusions about what's happening in different care sectors and what just transition means to them. What does that look like from their vantage point? One thing that we sort of confirmed in the process is indeed they're being left out of the conversation. Many of them, when we first approached, hadn't heard of just transition, even though the concepts, the principles, the core of it was very central to the things they cared about. But the spaces where people are using that language were not spaces they were invited to or included in. But all of them care deeply about a transition towards a more sustainable world and saw their role in it as quite central. The research was carried out by the Just Transition and Care Network, which is an international network that UNRWA participates in, including unions, activists, community organizers, care workers, subsistence, food provisioners, healthcare workers, educational workers, environmental care workers, and researchers. We approached the topic looking into 5 sectors of care. So we looked at domestic and community care. We looked at subsistence food provision, primarily indigenous and peasant food systems. Environmental care, or earth care as some people use the term. Healthcare and education. And we looked at both waged and unwaged work, also to sort of assert the importance of workers who are not necessarily in the formal economy but have an important role to play in just transition. So I just want to go quickly through those 5 sectors and highlight a few sort of insights that came from them. First, the domestic and community care realm. We looked, so in terms of domestic care, we're talking about, nursing, feeding, educating, socializing, cleaning, washing clothes, etc. in the home. But then also we noticed that there are important collective efforts that are happening outside of the home, but not necessarily in institutional settings, doing similar work, mutual aid, support networks, etc. Some of the dynamics that we found in that sector are feminization and racialization of the work, especially international sort of care chains, demand for migrant labor in care in homes. And in terms of the collective and community care, often that's what fills in the gaps where the state falls short and public programs aren't there. So those are incredibly important, but sort of invisibilized stopgap measures for where public support isn't there. In terms of the sort of environmental dimension of that sector, domestic workers are handling food waste, chemicals, incredibly affected by environmental regulations. They're exposed to toxic substances and environmental hazards regularly, and they can also be key agents of change within the home and within the community for how sort of shifting to more sustainable practices around waste, food provision, cleaning products, etc. But their current sort of job status is very precarious, in many cases vulnerable. So from that perspective, just transition means recognizing their essential role in sustaining life and demanding proper compensation, more stable jobs, more dignified working conditions, and also demanding public investment in care to sustain those gaps that are not being filled. In terms of food provisioning, we focused on sort of sustainable subsistence, productive and reproductive activities that involve food production, gathering food, and preparing food, so primarily in peasant and indigenous food systems, which, where women and girls are playing a central role in sustaining and ensuring the sort of feeding of communities at a local level. But also, many of these food systems are facing extreme challenges and being undermined by both private sector, large-scale agribusiness, corporate interests, but additionally by public agrarian policies which sort of facilitate the expansion of large-scale agriculture rather than peasant and indigenous food systems. So they're sort of facing very uphill battles in addition to feeding their communities. Obviously, there's an immediate relationship with the environment and caring for the lands that they tend and cultivate, but also ripple effects in the broader environment because of agriculture's potential to have runoff in rivers, etc. So the choice of which food systems we support has important ecological implications for what kind of ecosystems we're sustaining. So from that perspective, just transition means recognizing peasant and indigenous food systems as central to sustaining life, and supporting and valuing sustainable modes of food production, also more horizontal labor relations, and seeing food producers of this nature as care workers who are ensuring that their communities are nourished and fed. In terms of environmental care, there we're talking about sort of maintenance, restoration, protection of forests, etc. The dynamics there that we found are, these jobs are often very invisibilized, performed by indigenous and rural populations or river communities. And to add insult to injury, the people caring for those environments are often criminalized, facing threats of violence and dispossession and lack of recognition for the ecosystem sort of services and jobs that they're carrying out. And yet those roles of caring for the environment, things like clearing brush in forests to prevent forest fires, all sorts of tending of the environment are essential to sustaining ecosystems, and yet from that perspective there's an incredible need to recognize the rights of those people to be continuing that work. And then there's also a demand from a just transition perspective to support decent working conditions in those areas, and to include people engaging in environmental care in decisions about just transition, and sort of a demand for inclusive governance from those workers. Then finally, healthcare. There we looked primarily at healthcare happening outside the home. Obviously there's a lot of overlap in these sectors, domestic care and healthcare so there we focused on healthcare happening outside the home, looking at the services directed towards mental and physical well-being and caring for others. Again, the dynamics in this sector, highly feminized, highly racialized, very precarious jobs. And then, as Carolina explained very clearly in the intro, climate crises are increasing the demand and need for these services, and also deteriorating the infrastructure needed to sustain that demand, making it harder with a higher demand all at the same time. Another thing that came out of this research, which I thought was quite interesting, is the significant physical built infrastructure that healthcare and also education, which I'll talk about at the end, represents in terms of capacity to, a need to refurbish and renew, but also potential sites for solar panels or other types of renewable energies that could take advantage of that significant infrastructure and be a strategic use of oftentimes public infrastructure. There's also, from a just transition perspective in this sector, a need to invest in adequate emergency responses, because climate crises are very trying in this sector. Finally, I'll just wrap up with education. Similar dynamics, a very feminized sector, although largely public. There are increasing privatization, which brings challenges. And again, the physical infrastructure is extensive and has opportunities, but is also deteriorating. And then finally, the role of educators that was really highlighted here in terms of what just transition means is their important role in shaping our awareness and teaching about the environment and how we understand our relationship to the environment. So, there was really a call for us to see educators as pivotal actors in helping us rethink how we relate to the environment, helping us understand our role in transition, and centering care in just transition. So I think I will stop there so as not to go over time, but maybe just to close, there's a sort of tendency to see this moment as incredibly challenging to figure out how to implement just transition strategies, to work out the nuts and bolts of it, but it's also a massive opportunity to rethink the way what we want to be sustaining, and to try to think through how we set up our societies to support life, to sustain life, to put care and well-being at the center. So I'll end there. Thanks.
So thank you very much for your insightful points that you brought to this discussion. What we already see is that just transition is much broader than what we usually discuss in the climate forum. So it's not only to discuss how to transition to a low carbon economy. It's to discuss what is justice, what are invisible, as you mentioned. What the invisibility is something that connects also what Carolina and you shared. The invisibility of different crises, of the actions of public actors while reshaping the transportation and etc. and how it in other terms, how it increases the care burden, and it's invisible. And for you, the different type of care workers, a much broader conceptualization of care workers and how they see their role in this new economy, let's say like that, as care workers, and their importance in sustaining life. So we have here much food for thought already. So last but not least, Georgia, can you please share the perspectives of grassroots organizations putting on care when we think it in the center of the climate action?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Carol. So first, and more importantly, thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Zoe, for the organization of the panel. So my name is Georgia. I am executive director of an organization called ProComum, which in English would be Pro Commons. Comum is commons. And there's a reason why we put that name. We are a commons-based organization, which means that we use commons as a political practice and a lens to view, to design our projects, our mission, and care was always at the center. We like to say that care is the pavement of the commons, right? So you cannot build a commons without care. So, and care for us is relational. It's everything that sustains our life. And I like to say that, life is much bigger than anything else. It's bigger than capitalism. It is. And I think the Brazil history is a big example of that. As you might know, Brazil has a strong slavery past and present. And we had an intentional project of whitening the population and eliminating the black people, right? So, and that plan didn't work. 54% of the population of Brazil are black people. And how come did that happen if the state and the market try to erase this population and keep trying to erase this population with a number of technologies, bad technologies, no work, no job, no housing, no land. And this is the force and the power of the commons, because the black population, they share and they created their own strategies, And I think this collective action, which is centered in care and collective care, is really important for us to understand how the majority of the population is still alive, right? In midst of so much inequality and so much concentration of power and intentional death policies, as we've seen all around, right? And for us, care has always been this big strategy and a big, everybody likes to speak about complex system or system solutions. I think care is the biggest systemic solution we have. When you touch the care work, you touch the rock. You touch what sustains us all here, right? Even Elon Musk was cared for and is cared for, right? Everybody is cared for. Or maybe he doesn't care so much about people, but he's cared for, right? I mean, somehow he grew up, he's a big chubby, he eats, somebody cooks for him, right? So, I mean, if we think about the productive work, I mean, there's no chance that care, if we stop doing care work, we won't have anything, right? We won't have nothing. So I think this is the premise, right? Okay, so how does that relate to our work? I mean, we do a lot of things. I'm not going to list it, but I think it's important to say, I think CARE brought us with the systemic view to be in alliance with a number of other organizations that understood that and that have been historically defending that, as a political. So we put politics in the center of the discussion, right? Because otherwise we are just speaking about well-being. And I think well-being is important, but it's not enough. If I am well and you're not well, this is going to impact me systemically because we are all interdependent. So when we think about care, we learn from, indigenous population, but also the quilombolas in Brazil, Ribeirinhos, all the traditional population, but also, workers and grassroots organizations, specifically in Brazil. The role of black women, feminists, the feminist black women are very important. We're going to have the 25th of November, the Marcha Mundial das Mulheres Negras. And since 2015, they've been speaking about good living, bem viver, buen vivir, which was also something that Nilma Benches, who is a big thinker and activist from Belém, from SEDEMPA, brings, and I think it's really important for us to be making this discussion in the COP in Amazon, in Belém, because I think the Afro-Amazon and the indigenous, and the connection between Afro and indigenous people in this territory is very fundamental for this discussion on Buen Vivir. And I think Buen Vivir started with the indigenous, but it's also an alliance between black and indigenous population, which is the basis of our nation, right, as Brazilians. And I think all of that kind of sums our framework of action. And I think I'm secondly very happy to be here. And today, before I came here, I wrote in the group. So Procomum is doing the circuit care and climate here in Belém and Ananindeua. So here you have 20 initiatives. Each of them are doing different things that are connected to what they were describing. So people who are doing agroforestry, food systems, domestic workers, youth, and children, 60 plus people, but also culture, because we do feel that culture is caring for the people and around, especially memory and identity, heritage. All of that sustains our life as well and our belonging. And the reason we did that, the circuit is one of our methodologies, and the reason we do that is because we do an open call, we donate money for them, and we tell them story in a powerful way, because what we want to achieve is to enable people to see that there are many solutions being built every day, and this is what we call the citizen innovations, right? The core of Procomum's work is citizen innovation. So innovations that are built every day by citizens that are living the problems, and they're still alive, and not because of the state, not because of the market, because of the commons that are interacting between themselves. Of course, the state can play a big role and should, and I think that's why I'm so happy here, because I think we are always looking to close the gaps. We don't do any separation between local and global. We have always been trying to be in the global forums and with our local action. We have a strong local action in in the coastal area of São Paulo. We have a space, a cultural center called Procomum Lab, which is like a citizen innovation lab. And we've been working there for 10 years, really locally. but we've been part of many global networks. And today, before I came here, I wrote them about the study of Mariama and saying, you know, why I thought it was so important to be here and tell these stories is because what they do is the basis for what she's defending and what you're defending also, you know. And I think, I mean, this is so nice to see, you know, we are not basing our data on, you know, making up. You know, this is our everyday people in their everyday life, creating their everyday solution, which are very powerful. And because there are so many, and because there's so many inequalities, sometimes we lose track of it. And my work is to be inspired by that, and tell these stories, and but also open space for that. So I think at the basis of Procomun's work is political participation. But the way we understand political participation is not on social control, but is mostly co-producing politics and policy. You know, it's a bit a shift on understanding citizens as clients of the state or users of policies, but mostly and foremost creating policies and solutions, right? And we've done that with municipal level, federal government. We did that with the Social Development Ministry. We have been bringing our methodologies of innovation labs, citizen innovation labs, to a number of different spaces to, you know, to show that it is possible for us to enlarge what we understand as social participation and the relationship between communities and the state and communities and the other institutions. You know? So why not bring, you know, partnerships between the state and the community solutions? And one of the things that we create was La Cuida, which is the Latin American Laboratory for Economy of Care. We did that in Montevideo and Cali. And there's a number of initiatives that came out of this lab, including some of which became policies, pilots of policies being implemented. So in Montevideo, for example, we had the Guarderia Nocturna that was developed by Las Grullas, which is like a group of people that are sex workers and other people that used to work at night. And they wanted a Guarderia Nocturna, like a night care facility for the children. And that has actually been implemented. And that came out of one of our labs. And this is not the only one. And it's also not, the concept of innovation is not only to be new. But it's the idea of how do we produce knowledge, create conviviality and collaboration, and create infrastructure for that. And I think care is an infrastructure of social participation. That's why Procomun always does the care tent everywhere we go, you know, because we believe also that care sustains our political practices. So for us, it's really important for us to be in this forum talking about care-centered justice transitions and speaking about money as well, right? Because it's very important for us to highlight the importance of the work people are doing on the ground, but we need money for them, right? Because otherwise, you know, it's always the precariousness, and we don't want to make it glamorous to be over and over, right? So they need to be recognized by the work they do and the fact that they're sustaining life on the territories, and they have to be paid for that, you know, and recognized for that. So this is the challenge. We are also launching a civil society letter that we are organizing with other organizations from civil society to be addressed to the presidency of COP30. And we are organizing together with RDRC and the Global Alliance for Care and UN Women, also the Care Pavilion on Saturday and Sunday, which we will invite you all to come because there's going to be a lot of other discussions complementing this one, but also a care tent so we can take care of ourselves and learn with each other our care strategies, and also a space for the children, and just the space is the Eco Amazonias. Is run by a Black organization here in the periphery of Belém. And when you see the house, you don't see the yard. And the yard is agroforestry, very beautiful. So we will be kind of in the middle of the trees and the nature and continue our conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Georgia. It was so amazing what you three shared with us from different perspectives. but highlighting the centrality of care in the discussion of just transition. One certainty that we have now is that the world has changed and is changing very fast due to the climate crisis, where we are either mitigating or adapting to this new reality. So when we think about just transition, we need to think about, remember about our dreams and why we are here as young women, for example, to transform the society in a way that all women have equal rights, that all women have equal opportunities to benefit and contribute to a better life, a better living condition. So I loved when you said that I cannot be well when I see other person here just by my side. That is not okay. So we are in a systemic and in a very interconnected world. So we live in a world that has so many structural inequalities, gender inequalities, race inequalities, ethnic inequalities, for people with disabilities, and etc. And we have now an opportunity to promote a revolution. And this revolution is care-centered. So if we have a society, a care society, where we don't ignore the invisible crisis generated by human actions and human solutions to certain problems that, okay, it can solve this problem, but women will be carrying the burden through their care responsibilities. And we don't want to sustain and to have this burden alone. We need to share the responsibility. Not only share the responsibility, but recognize and value our care work. Not only the invisible one that we all do, but the paid workers as well. And when we are speaking about paid workers, in the sense that you highlighted too, Zoe, not only the most common type of care work, but expanding it in a way that we are talking about sustaining lives. Not only sustaining, supporting and caring about the children and the people that are temporarily or permanently in some needs of care, but sustaining lives and connecting the care with the environment and care with people and the society as a whole. And how this care is connected also in a way that we have our opportunities, the opportunities to showcase and demonstrate our agency power, to showcase our solutions, to participate effectively in decision-making spaces, diverse decision-making spaces, and to be able to have decent work. So I'm glad with this discussion that amplifies and broadens the concept and the understanding of just transition in a way that we want. We want a care society. We want to have our rights realized, and we want to be able to live our dreams, a dream of an equal world where everybody has equal opportunities. Thank you very much. And please go on the weekend to the Eco Amazonas space, our care pavilion, where we will be able to discuss in more detail.
Also tomorrow evening, we'll have another event on just transition and care and climate at 6:30 in side room 8, which has been changed. It was 6 and now it's 8. So keep that in mind. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow.